Uh, it's a very, very interesting panel. I'm personally very happy to be here at Asia Liberty Forum again. I've been a part of several other Asia Liberty Forum platforms in the last 10 years' time. Very excited to be here. Thanks for, first of all, Atlas Network for hosting this very important panel, very relevant in the context of Asia and the world in general, but Asia in particular. Championing freedom and dignity, policy pathways for gender and sexual minorities in Asia. I think for a group that's so closely linked with the liberal movement, with human dignity, we don't need to particularly emphasize why human dignity is important and why human dignity is important unconditionally. So to that extent, it's already a convinced group when it comes to human dignity. When it comes to gender and sexual minorities in particular, it's a specific sort of group or very broad sort of part of the population which seems to be struggling to have that basic dignity. I mean, of course, one that lies with them, but the second, which the state has taken responsibility to give to the citizens. And to that extent, Asia, of course, has made a lot of progress in the last few years' time, but there is also a lot of distance to be covered. Friedrich Naumann Foundation in particular has been working in this region on this with their Born with Pride theme over the last 4 to 5 years' time. We have had a bunch of conferences across South Asia. We have published coffee table books. There's been direct work that's been happening with policymakers through research as well as through direct engagement with the policymakers on this topic. We are seeing some early success in countries like India, for example, again in Nepal, of course, which the panelists will talk about. I have a wonderful group of panelists, which of course I'm going to introduce a little later. Prior to that, I'm going to invite Frank Hoffman from the Friedrich Naumann Foundation to deliver the opening remarks on behalf of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation, opening the panel. Frank, may I please request you to join us on the stage, and if you could use this.
Yeah, okay. Hello, good afternoon, good evening. Yeah, it's great to see the setting. Looks more like a living room than a conference room. Now, all the more, I regret that we couldn't be here. I hated to romp into a conference just like a minute before a panel starts, not having met anybody, not even having met all the panelists. So sorry for that, but we were traveling in South Asia with a group of multipliers and parliamentarians from Europe. Well, really seeing liberal and democratic success stories in the region. We've been to Bhutan, and we just today afternoon arrived from Dharamshala, the seat of the Central Tibetan administration. But now here, the Asia Liberty Forum. Let me start by welcoming, well, I have so many lists, a name on my lists. We go maybe with the parliamentarians first. We'll have, I believe, a short address by Mr. Dolawate, Member of Parliament from Sri Lanka. Michael Kauch, until May this year, Member of the European Parliament. We have our panelists, Akai, Miss, I hope I get it right. Sorry, you were one of the panelists who I couldn't meet before the panel, Miss Kyoka, and our dear friend from Nepal, Paragram. And, well, representative for our partnership with the Atlas Network, Tom Palmer. Ladies and gentlemen, we all, I mean, you all gathered here in Delhi to celebrate freedom. Freedom and individual liberalism. And a key part of individual liberty is a person's gender identity and sexual orientation. We have seen a very good decade in Asia, might I say. We have seen the recognition of same-sex marriage in Taiwan. We've seen the recognition of same-sex marriage in Nepal. India has decriminalized homosexuality. We've seen initiatives in Sri Lanka and in Bhutan to that same effect. So when we look at the legal and regulatory framework, it's been a good 10 years for many countries in Asia. But of course, challenges remain. While the legal framework is improving, there is still a lot that needs to be done when it comes to representation in politics, in the economy, and in media, among other areas. We have brought together today a panel to discuss some of these issues. And this panel today is a continuation of our efforts, as Rohan has mentioned already, efforts that started really in 2020. Our aim is to connect actors across, well, internationally, across Asia, and across South Asia in particular, because very often we look at very similar challenges, and there's, we believe, a lot that we can learn from one another when it comes to exchanging strategies, when it comes to finding a voice, and when it comes to being visible as the LGBTIQ community. For us as a German foundation, it's also very important to connect all these issues with the debate in Europe. One might argue that Europe has been at the vanguard when it comes to promoting LGBT rights. And it has a lot of, or is home to a lot of very strong institutions promoting human rights. But also in Europe, the whole scenario is not without challenges. Whereas transgender rights have very often been the first step, the first thing that was debated in South Asia, it is among the more contentious issues in Europe. And we see some backsliding in some European countries when it comes to LGBT rights. Yeah, as Rohan mentioned, the Born with Pride, well, activities under the label Born with Pride, we've really organized that and supported that since 2020. Well, it started by and large with online events. It was the time of the pandemic. But then we also went on to organize in-person events, regional conferences. We've been in Sri Lanka and Nepal. We've had smaller events in India. And we had a whole range of publications, smaller articles, and policy papers. This commitment will continue. So without further ado, I'd like to thank all the panelists for being with us today. I'd like to thank our partners, the Atlas Network and the Center for Civil Society here in Delhi. And I'd like to thank all the colleagues from FNF, from the Atlas Network, and from CCS who made this event possible. So with that, hope for an engaging discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frank. Thank you so much, Frank, and really excited to get this panel discussion going. I think when we were putting this panel together, one of the things that sort of was consistently in our mind that let's first try and sort of understand in the first part of the panel where each of these countries that we see here, and I'll of course introduce the panelists a little bit more in detail, but at the moment we have Nepal, Thailand, and India, and of course one of the panelists joining through a video addressed from Sri Lanka. If we look at the subset of these countries as South Asia and subsequently in Asia, there are only 3 countries in Asia right now, one of course being Taiwan, second Thailand, and subsequently Nepal, who have marriage equality rights sort of approved either by the Supreme Court, the judiciary, or by the legislation. In Nepal, it's only by legislation, by the Supreme Court verdict, whereas in case of Taiwan and Thailand, it's a parliamentary sort of bill that's passed, which means that the legislation exists. In India, we heard that there is a Supreme Court case going on. I remember that the last Asia Liberty Forum in India was 2017. And a lot has changed since then in the last 7 years, and it has changed for good. And I'm happy to share that we, of course, have decriminalized homosexuality in 2018 through a Supreme Court judgment. And of course, now, recently, the government has formed a committee to review the request for same-sex marriages. They have sort of initiated that process on a push from the Supreme Court once again. But given that the reputation that the current government has, given that it's very religiously conservative, hence by virtue of it against the same-sex rights, etc., to part of which stood true in the Supreme Court, but subsequently the steps that the government has taken seems like they are willing to sort of go down this path of formalizing some of these rights. So with this as a glimpse, that said though, the countries like, let's say for example, Afghanistan, Maldives, Pakistan have progressively seen the sort of space for LGBTQI individuals shrinking. In Afghanistan and Maldives, since the government has come in, there is a new interpretation of Sharia. There has been active sort of going after same-sex individuals, and there have been several instances of torture and murders included. In Bangladesh and India, the situation isn't that sort of intense. That said, attacks on people who openly identify themselves as transgender persons or people who identify themselves as homosexual individuals, attacks from fringe political groups, cases of bullying and harassment in excessive forms are very common. Given that, I think what we are going to discuss today is something that we do feel that economic freedom cannot be completed without individual freedoms. Bounded individuals cannot be economically free. And in that context, we are going to have this conversation today. Some of the views will come from their own reality and their point of view. In a forum like this, needless to say, we will be respectful for everybody's point of view, whether we agree with them or don't agree with them. The panel will assume a tone of being solution-oriented and what's the path forward rather than revolving around challenges. With this very long introduction, I'm going to introduce my first panelist, Akai Padumshali, who's a transgender activist from India. She has done a phenomenal job in advancing the whole cause of transgender rights, right from the Nalsa judgment, which she will talk about. She is very active also in the area of protection of children and through her organization. And of course, working on gender and sexuality education in Karnataka in particular, but also with an aspiration to work all over India. She's also part of the whole political sort of process and a political party. She will talk about it. Welcome, Akai, to the panel. Really honored to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have Kyoka with us from Thailand. They have joined specifically for this. At this young age, they have been a part of the parliamentary committee of Thailand government, which recently, and we must congratulate them for this, they recently passed the marriage equality bill. And Thailand hence becomes the second country in entire Asia to have a formal legislation for marriage equality. So congratulations, Kyoka. Really thank you for joining us and look forward to hearing your thoughts as well. And Parakram represents our neighbor, Nepal, which was in South Asia at least the front runner of LGBTQI rights. In some ways, of course, the challenges exist. Parakram himself has given a voice in a completely new way using social media, has several thousand followers, has a certain sort of big influence on how the youth of Nepal thinks. So very, very blessed to have you here as well, Parakram. Welcome. He has been a part of Born with Pride initiative and some of the conferences before and has been generous to give his voice to the issues that we have been raising through Born with Pride and Friedrich Naumann Foundation. So great to have you here. Our fourth panelist is not here today, and let's wish him all the best because he's facing the test of voters because actually the Sri Lanka general elections are happening today. Hence, he could not join us here. Mr. Premanath Dolavatte, who's hopeful to get re-elected. For the LGBTQI individuals, his re-election perhaps is important because he's the only parliamentarian in the region who had the courage to present private member bill for decriminalization of homosexuality in Sri Lanka, as well as passing of the marriage equality bill in Sri Lanka. That bill, of course, is rejected. He has given a video address with respect to that. We will hear him through a video address. I'm going to first start with Mr. Premanath Dolavatte. Let's hear about Sri Lanka. Then I'll come to Akai, Kyoka, and then to Parakram. In the first part of this discussion, we'll just quickly get a status update on what's the current status in each of these countries. Does that work? Yeah? All right. So, Kanaiyaji, can we please have part 1 of the video played, please?
Thank you very much for inviting me for Asia Liberty Forum 2024 in 20th in New Delhi. Unfortunately, I can't take part because you all aware in Sri Lanka we are having presidential elections. I would like to wish you all, the participants, the stakeholders, resource persons, the community people, who are interested people, who sharing very valuable thoughts in this Liberty Forum. And I take this opportunity to thank Friedrich Naumann Foundation, the good work they are doing, the betterment for the ensuring the human rights aspects on this marginalized group. I've been given some questions to share my thoughts. First of all, I believe in Sri Lanka, we have been working, I have seen a lot of people working on the LGBTQIA plus communities' rights from last 2 decades, and there were some efforts to decriminalize the LGBTQ conduct. But unfortunately, in Sri Lankan Penal Code, we have this 365 and 365A sections where the conduct had criminalized here for 2 years imprisonment. In Sri Lanka, we have given all the health facilities towards the community people, and they have a separate section in Colombo Hospital. So mainly the transgender people, whoever has their own issue, they can come and take the medicine from Colombo Hospital. And we have some challenges. Very recently, we had a survey on whether the people are willing to change the law, especially the 365. Only they wanted to know whether this is going to be decriminalized or whether this community marriage rights were ensured. So there was two arguments, such as decriminalization is quite acceptable, but they were really against on giving marriage rights. When it's come to the survey, 74% of the people, they has no issue on decriminalization. But when it's come to the marriage rights, there was a huge differences and huge issue on that, because they were not willing to change the present laws, and they were not willing to have the recognition towards the gay or lesbian couples in Sri Lanka. I believe that aspect, from the government point of view, we have the same belief. So this is not time to have that kind of beliefs, that kind of changes, because we had to first, I think we had to decriminalize the conduct. And regarding the way that people think about, especially when it's come to transgender people, and there are a lot of transgender people, especially when it's come to families, how they think about their sons or daughters. The way they think two decades ago, it's quite different. But right now, I must share, the things has been changing, and people has like they don't have any issue regarding this. Whatever the way they are living, mostly the young people, they don't have any issue on those. So they really think the rights has to be ensured. There are some marginalized people like from the community, they have to ensure their rights. But mainly the ordinary society is not willing to give the marriage rights. So we have to have that idea with us, and we have to move on with the society aspirations. At the same time, we have to start from somewhere.
We'll hear a little bit from Mr. Dolawat in subsequent part of the panel discussion. I think what he's sharing is essentially that Sri Lanka, like India and Bangladesh and Pakistan, inherited its sort of Section 365A from colonial times, from the Ceylon Act, and that has stayed there. The Supreme Court of Sri Lanka has paused any convictions under that particular section. So the police cannot go and sort of arrest homosexual individuals in Sri Lanka. That said, the parliament is yet to pass a bill to sort of repeal the section entirely. And at the same time, you heard that the parliament feels that the marriages is something that's the country is not ready for it. So they have gone for a sort of a referendum. They have taken run some survey to take opinions from the citizens. I'm going to first switch to my left, go to Akai to hear a little bit of what's happening in India. Akai, of course, we would love to hear a little bit about the transgender rights and where have they come this far. But also to hear a little bit about the same-sex individuals and what's happening with that. And if I may allow just like 10 seconds time, transgender identity in case of Asia, particularly South Asia, is slightly distinct from how we understand the transgender identity globally. There is some cultural rooting to it, I would let Akkai also educate the audience a little bit about the transgender identity, how it is unique in case of South Asia. Over to you, Akkai.
Thank you, Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom. Thank you, moderator. And happy to meet all the human beings sitting in this auditorium. I think India is good. We are shining. We are celebrating our victories. We're in the process of celebrating our Azadi Ki Amrita Mahotsav of the 75th year, stepping into the 76th year. Having said the largest democracy has largest, the ritual, the tradition, the culture, many other aspects of it. As a movement of sexual minorities, gender minorities, and intersex communities in this whole country, we have never left our activism. And we don't want to leave so. We have never left about talking the politics of identity and sexualities wherever we are exists. So keeping that as a force, the recent ups and downs from 2018, the Constitution Bench verdict on decriminalizing the human sexuality agenda under the Section 377 was read down. And I want to still remember Justice Indu Malhotra what she said. History needs to owe an apology for the movement of sexual minorities as well as the family members. So it shows the commitment of the judiciary of this country. Having said very, quite far, like further later, the whole issue about the same sex / same gender / transgender person getting married and being part of so-called institution of marriage, according to us, and what is this marriage all about? I think we have seen so much of ups and downs in the country that we are part of. Very unfortunate that the Honorable Supreme Court, again Constitution Bench word said, this is not a fundamental right, this can be accepted for this country, but we make sure that the same sex, same gender people shall not be facing any discrimination on the grounds of gender and sexuality. Hence, it has also been constituted a committee under the Cabinet Secretary talking about the concerns of the so-called LGBTQI++ communities. And we use it in the local term called Jogappa, Marladi, Shivashakti, Jokta, Akwa, Nirvana, Satla, Panti Satla, and multiple diverse of identities. So here where we stand with so much of differences within the movement, When you talk about the movement, it is also about the class discrimination we still go through. Very fancily we all say, I belong to the LGBTQI, I'm a gender non-binary, I belong to so-and-so identity. I think in this process somewhere the local traditional / cultural the identities has been left out. So the question is why? Is it because of privatization? Is it because of globalization? Is it because of fancy politics we are talking about? So keeping those concerns, I think what the Supreme Court of India did was quite disappointing for me personally. But my same Supreme Court has also delivered transgender person can get married to the opposite sex. They have the right for adoption, right for inheritance, and many other aspects of it. This is something called which really brings some amount of hopes to be part of the largest democracy.
Thank you so much. May I just move to Kyoka at this point to give us a little insight into what's happening in Thailand? Is it an ideal world now that the marriage equality bill is passed, or there is still a distance to cover? Over to you for a quick status check on Thailand. Do you need help? Here's a small...
Well, first of all, Thailand has been known as the gay paradise for decades, and it's been known as a place where people go to have fun and enjoy and just travel. But it hasn't been like that, actually, because we never had marriage equality, we never had gender recognition, and we just never had equal rights. Right, but I would say this year, on June 18th, we finally passed the marriage equality bill after over 20 years of hard work and battles within the with all the activists. So going back to 20 years ago, it started with during the Thaksin government. It was when So at that point, marriage equality wasn't really a word, and I'll talk about it later. But during that time, during his government, same-sex marriage was brought up to discussion, And then a few years later, when it was the Yingluck government, we had discussions around civil partnership. But then, since in Thailand, we've never had democracy, even though they say we have this thing called constitutional monarchy, where we have democracy and where we also have a king. And, you know, that's not democracy. Well, so in 2014, we had a coup. It was, I don't know how many, after how many times, because Thailand's been having coups like over and over again. And at that point, anything related to gender, sexuality, or any diversity, there was no discussions around it because the country was literally, I would say, the military just blocked people. And I still remember, like, I was only like 9 years old or something. It was a pretty terrifying time. Like, and I would say no one would think about like diversity or anything at that point. And then a couple years later, in around 2019, when the pro-democracy youth movement started to spark in different places around Thailand, especially in Bangkok, that was when it was 2019, so it was during the election. And during that time, people started talking more about equality, diversity, gender and sexuality, and the LGBTQ plus community. It was that point when this movement, I would say, like started having this huge momentum, because in 2019, during Chiang Mai Pride, it was the first time that the word marriage equality, I would say, emerged in Thai. So in Thai, we say somrot thao tiam. Somrot means marriage, thao tiam means equality. And it actually came from this homeless person. He was probably sitting down and like just like asking like people who were dancing, what does marriage mean? No, what does marriage equality means? Because they were shouting marriage equality, 1448 for all, blah blah blah, and then that was the moment where people were like, oh, we need to use the word somrot thao tiam as our movement, I would say, phrase. And literally after that moment, a lot of like bigger protests started happening around the country. I have friends who got charged because they were just protesting for freedom and equality. But actually in 2021, my friends were actually my activist friends were able to, I would say, organize a huge protest in one of the biggest roads in Thailand, in Bangkok, and they gathered over 100,000 signatures within one night for the marriage equality bill, for the people's draft. And after that, we started having Pride, like official Pride, supported by the city and also the private sectors as well. And in 2022, we had the marriage equality bill from the Move Forward Party up for discussion in the parliament, and also had the civil partnership bill. It passed the first reading, but then it was election time again. So then it never went forward, so it just stopped, and we just had to start all over again from zero. So then in 2023, so around August, I would say, I don't really remember like the clear timeline, but we started collecting petitions again. So we needed 10,000. So we just needed the minimum. We weren't like, we were like, even though we had 360,000 for the first one, we were like, okay, 10,000 will be enough. So we got 10,000. And this time we had 4 bills. So one from the government, the other one from civil society, the People's Draft, one from the Democrat Party, and the other one from the Move Forward Party, which is also known as the People's Party right now. And then after I would say about 6 months of discussion, we're able to put those 4 bills together, pass through the first and second reading in the lower house and the upper house as well. So it's been a really long journey, and I'm a really new person to this movement compared to everyone else. But I would say we were able to come this far because of all of the people who've supported this movement, and also how accepting Thai society is compared to how the government was in the past. But luckily, we had so until July, we had a different prime minister. We have a new one from the same party, but because of the PM Seta Visin, we were able to actually push this bill faster than what we have expected, because it was one of his policies that he was advocating for. And even before the election, he was saying, okay, if I become PM, this is on my top priority list. So right now we're just waiting for the royal endorsement and for the Royal Gazette to announce that the king is signed. We're still waiting, and we need him to sign it as soon as possible. But yeah, that's about it, I think.
Thank you so much, Kyoka. Thank you for this detailed view. And also, I think with Atlas, a very large sort of group of think tanks that are associated, and a bunch of young researchers working on other difficult issues of public policy and trying to change. I'm sure a lot of them would love to hear from you later, maybe after this panel as well, about just picking up these difficult issues to bring policy change and the whole nitty-gritties of it and the whole 9 yards of it. So Kyoka is available after this panel discussion. Those of you would like to hear about just what are the parallels on some of the other difficult policy issues that you engage on, to hear from Kyoka. Thank you so much. Parakram, may I invite you to talk a little bit about Nepal and take us through where we stand, the rooftop of the world, so to say. Is it as pretty there?
In the international press, it definitely is very pretty, but I don't completely agree or disagree to that. When it comes to Nepal, we were never under the colonial rule law, so the issue was never about decriminalizing people like us, but it was about recognizing us and giving us protection against discrimination. With the help of Blue Diamond Society, which is a primary organization for sexual and gender minorities. They've been in the forefront since 2001, and they're still going strong. With the help of them, by 2007, there was a landmark ruling by the Supreme Court giving us protection and recognizing LGBTQIA plus people. And by 2015, it was amended in the Constitution. It was explicitly mentioned, so that was a great win, and it was seen in a very positive light, and rightfully so. Also, after the 2007 ruling, third gender people could change their gender marker in their citizenship and passport, and there was an others category. So that was also really good for their time. However, with time, I feel like this others category is more problematic because it's very generic. There needs to be more division for what others come under. When last year, same-sex marriage, in 2023, same-sex marriage was also passed by the Supreme Court. They ruled in favor of same-sex marriage, which was amazing. It was great. However, in the Civil Code of 2017, it still states that marriage is a union between a man and a woman. So now with this, we hope that we can help, through advocacy efforts, help change this in the upcoming Civil Code Union. this year, sorry, 1 month ago, Ruxana Kapali, who is a trans activist and a lawyer, she won, Supreme Court ruled in favor of her being able to change her gender marker from male to female in her citizenship card, which was a great win for trans people. And as of now, it is only she has gotten that, but Supreme Court has ordered the legislature to make rules and laws in certain ways to help all trans people change their gender with ease. So there is a lot of progress in Nepal, but I feel like the international press highlights it more than what it is in the grassroots level. But certainly in South Asia, we are quite progressive, and that still shouldn't stop us from pushing towards complete equality and,
Sure. Thank you so much for that, Parakram. And it's remarkable in case of Nepal, and I think people from a bunch of our colleagues who have joined from Nepal would agree that the country has not just seen change of governments, but change of constitution itself. And in that entire sort of chaos, this coming this far is very remarkable. So also thanks to Nepal for being that little flag bearer of freedom in the region, despite being a small country, as they say, but definitely a front runner when it comes to LGBTQIA rights. In the subsequent part, I think we are going to move a little bit towards looking at, of course, challenges, but as all of you are involved very directly in sort of giving voice and also trying to solve the challenges. Let's hear very quickly, what are the 2-3 pressing issues that you think are really, really important, whether they are from the policy point of view, whether they are from the social point of view, whether it's just about stigma, whether it's just about not having an equal place within the society, whether it's that, or is it something a little more, whether it's related to policy. In case of India, just for an example, something like self-identity and not having some district magistrate confirming what your gender is, or trying to prove to some district magistrate what my gender is. And I don't know what expertise that you need to have or which certification you need to have to confirm other people's gender. So I think these are issues that are there, but they are not just relevant to LGBTQI people, but this also goes against the fundamental idea of individual liberty, that somebody else deciding what your identity is going to be without having any qualification, first of all, to do so, and government giving them that right to do so. I think that entire process itself sounds very full of contrasts. So let's hear a little bit about that in the context of India, about transgender rights in particular, what's happening. In case of Sri Lanka also we are going to hear. So Kanaya ji, can we perhaps start with Sri Lanka first and Akai, and then I'll come to you. Let's hear what the path for Sri Lanka looks like from Mr. Dolavatte again, and we'll come to Akai for India.
In this election also, there are some parties, they recognize their rights, and there are some parties, they are not recognizing their rights. But anyway, I think this is a human right, where we have to ensure, because the leader must ensure marginalized people's rights. Anybody can ensure majority's right. So we have to ensure marginalized people's right. So His Excellency Ranil Wickremesinghe has supported me, and he has been supporting this community quite a lot, and he really valued on these people's right. And I must say, I presented the tribal member bill to the parliament in 2 years ago, and that was quite significant moment in the community, as well as not only the community, the people who really care about these marginalized groups' rights. There are a lot of people who care about their rights. They are not from the community, but they value the human right aspect, and they think those people also among our society. They must live without having any issue, without having any discrimination. So there are very progressive people in Sri Lanka, as well as some conservative people. In each and every society, we can see both ideas. But when we compare with the India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, in the region, I think they have gone far ahead us. But unfortunately, even though we are practicing good Buddhism, the majority is practicing good Buddhism, but sometimes our people, like, they don't want to tolerate others' feelings. So I'm really ashamed on that. Even though I'm practicing good Buddhism, the Buddhist Lord Buddha said that you have to accept the existence, you have to tolerate others. But still, in the region, we are far behind when it's come to communities' right. So I took the initiative to present the private member bill to change the penal code in Sri Lanka. So after that, some of the people, like some citizens of this country, they have gone to Supreme Court challenging my amendment. The first time in my career as a lawyer, I have done a lot of cases. I have appeared for a lot of cases, but the first time I become a respondent on this issue. But I am very glad to ensure these marginalized people's right. I had to face that difficulty, but I don't mind. And fortunately, and nicely planned amendment which I presented, and ultimately the determination came from the Supreme Court is this amendment is tallying with the Constitution, and at the same time you can pass the amendment with the simple majority. So we have done the first reading, we have done the second reading. It's in the third reading process. Hopefully, I believe after winning our presidential candidate Ranil Wickremesinghe, we can pass this bill. Then it will become the law of this country. Few months ago, I am privileged to pass the youth quota bill towards Sri Lankan politics. That's where Sri Lankan youth can participate in politics in their nominations. Each and every party has to give a youth quota when they are running for a local government elections. So that's a first law in this country where the private member has introduced. This is my second bill which I presented to the parliament. Hopefully, I believe after the election we can pass this. Then we can start because I think decriminalization is the primary thing which we have to do. At the same time, in Sri Lankan society, a lot of people accept that they don't have any issue on decriminalization process. Finally, I must tell you, these innocent people's rights should be ensured. So we have done our part in the legislature. As a member of parliament, I think I can pass this law. I must take this opportunity to thank Friedrich Naumann Foundation. Please keep up the good work you are doing towards this human right aspect, as well as ensure this LGBTQIA plus community rights. Mainly, I think why I took this initiative and why this has come to this far. This is not I am discriminating this community. I might be ended as a gay person tomorrow. I might be ended as a transgender person. Anything can be happen in future. But as a human being, I believe this is human rights. Those people must live in this society without having any discrimination. So that aspect made me to change this law, as well as I have read a lot of books, as well as I have watched a lot of movies. At the same time, I'm a lawyer and I'm a leader. The leader should ensure marginalized communities' rights. Any person can give the leadership towards the majority. But the marginalized groups, outnumbers groups, their rights hasn't discussed properly. So I raise my voice towards this community. I believe I did my part as a legislature, as a member of legislature. Finally, I thank everyone who took the initiative to have this Asia Liberty Forum. Unfortunately, even though I can't participate this time, next time I'll be participating for the forum. And I give warm regards to everyone, each of everyone who participated. and whoever working towards the betterment of this society, especially these LGBTQIA plus marginalized people. Thank you very much.
So that's Sri Lanka. I think just very, very quickly, one line summary is that currently he is responding on behalf of the government in Supreme Court. The issue is the case is filed by the LGBTQ activism groups in Sri Lanka because his point is civil union of same-sex individuals is just as okay. We don't have to insist on marriage, which is also the case in India. The government had also taken a similar stance in case of India, that marriage, quite often the marriage legislation is religion specific in this region. For example, India, the biggest marriage legislation is Hindu Marriage Act. It's not just a marriage act, but it's a Hindu Marriage Act. So the amendments to that, etc. So that's the stance government has taken, and the government's preference is to, we are okay with civil unions, but we may not be acceptable to the idea of marriage or extending the definition of marriage. That's the stance government has taken in India, very familiar and very similar in case of Sri Lanka as well. Let's hear a little bit about the situation in India.
I think before coming to India, I just want to bring the global perspective as a community, how we are facing that so-called stigma / discrimination / social exclusion / extremism amount of sort of thinking. I want to stand in support and solidarity with our Sri Lankan friends. Because of the political crisis, see, the sexual minority status is very, very pathetic. Go back to the Ugandan parliament. It has passed in the parliament saying that we will be considering the sexual minorities as terrorists, activists as terrorists. So what does that mean? The Russian Supreme Court also said on the same lines. So when these things are happening in 21st century across the globe, I think I was quite disappointed. There is no such global response, be it from the United Nations Human Rights Council or whatever bodies that we are part of. Why people have shut their mouth? Why aren't they speaking? My only concern is that my orientation is this, my identity is this, my sexuality is this. Just because of that, how can a system of majoritarian, how can a system of totalitarian can be so reluctant towards one section of society, and we want to take a strong objection on it. Coming back to India's concern, very good judgments from 2009 to 2014 to 2018 to 2022 to 2023, very awesome judgments. But what happens with the implementation mechanism? The government policies is quite far from the truth of justice. You get it? Same thing. Very, very thing. When the Supreme Court said fundamental right we cannot be considered, the 2018 says, when Justice Indu Malhotra said on the same lines. The question is, where are the representatives of sexual minorities before my floor of the legislature? Be it the parliament, be it the state legislature, be it the judiciary, be it the executive. Saurabh Kirpal, the openly gay man who was supposed to be the High Court judge for the Delhi High Court, took back his decision. So means, are we talking about still practicing of, one side, like you want to be politically correct. Second time, you want to be politically incorrect. So then the phobia minds existing. So my question is that until we don't fight against this caste system, you got it? This extreme amount of communal violence in the name of caste, class, creed, gender, sexuality, ethnicity, race, food, etc. So how do you bring up these, concerns, knowing that India is such a largest democracy, having practices so much of belief and so much of practices, in the name of that, we cannot really shrink the spaces of sexual minorities. If that's so, we want to take our objection, and I would really urge through this forum that especially the largest democracy needs to have a political representation before its parliament, before its state legislature. Then we can speak for our rights. How many parliamentarians are so much educated to speak the politics of sex, gender, and sexuality? People are just so self-shy. When Shashi Tharoor was presented before the parliament, the members of the like the so-called the ruling said, "Oh, you are a gay, that's why you're supporting." And so what? It's none of your business to decide people's identity.
No, certainly, I think one of the major Thank you, Akai. I think one important point that Akai touched upon, which I want to talk about in this, because the occupational barriers, we say that legislation or recognition, it's not just about the identity, but for the community, especially the LGBTQIA community, occupational barriers exist. And let's not even go down to the street, let's look at the high-profile job of High Court judge, who was supposed to become a Supreme Court judge, he was not allowed, and government had taken an open stance that he cannot be made a Supreme Court judge because they thought that he will be biased towards LGBTQI community when he gives the decisions. Now let's think about what all biases the other judges of Supreme Court carry with them, and were they given same sort of like a scrutiny when they were selected as judges. That's the kind of occupational barrier we are talking about. Similarly, a lot of multinational companies have, and rightly so, it's great, are talking about the pink economy. They're coming out and sort of putting their power behind LGBTQI community, at least on the visibility front. That said, in leadership positions, in senior positions, or publicly visible profiles, you'll never see a transgender person. So you can somehow think that there is some amount of tokenism that's involved in that, and there are still barriers based on how you look and your outward appearance. Those are some of the challenges in case of India that we still really need to overcome, and we need to perhaps build larger public opinion about it rather than just relying on the policy change. We'll move to Thailand. We will also hear a little bit from Kyoka about what does now the path look like. Is it really the end of the struggle that now we have marriage equality? Is it the end point of the LGBTQI movement that you have built, and now as a young member of it, what is your aspiration for what must happen in Thailand? What's the path to be taken? Over to you, Kyoka.
Well, first of all, even though we passed the marriage equality bill in Thailand, we still do not have equal parental rights for gender diverse and queer couples because so in our bill, in the People's Draft bill, we had a section where we hope to amend the parental section from changing from mother and father to parents to make it gender neutral because other words in other sections of the marriage equality bill is already gender neutral. But then the MPs were like, no, if you use the word first intended parent, it will create a lot of confusion. You will have to amend the criminal code, this code, that code, and everything beyond the civil and commercial code because what we were able to do was we amended the civil and commercial code. That's why it just never happened, and we're still looking for what's going to happen next. But then it's not just about marriage equality because we do not have gender recognition yet, and that is something what the community is working on, and it is extremely important, but at the same time it will be way more challenging compared to the marriage equality bill because there will be things related to the military enlistment, ROTC, and all those stuff which involves the military. So I really cannot predict what's going to happen in the future, even though we have a pretty accepting and open government. It doesn't mean that it's going to pass immediately. And I just really hope that it will pass within the next 3 years. But we still have to see, and the gender recognition bills will go up for debate hopefully soon. But we still have to keep an eye on it. And then there's another bill, and it's to decriminalize sex work because within the LGBTQ plus community, especially the trans community, people end up in sex work, but it creates another level of challenge, stigma, and so much more because the police can charge you, they can fine you. And when that's the only job out there that you can get and you get charged, it doesn't make sense. And the government shouldn't have, they shouldn't be like, oh, you can do this, you cannot do that. People should have their autonomy, like literally hands off. Like they should not have like any regulations on on people's choice with like whatever they do with their own body and with their own decisions. And so there's like three big things, but another thing is the Constitution, because it is still very much problematic. It was drafted during the coup, so it's been about 10 years or maybe less, but in the Thai Constitution and also in the Gender Equality Act, there's this kind of, I would say, wording written. So it says, you cannot, I'll say it in easy words because I don't remember the exact words, but it's like, you cannot discriminate anyone. But if it's related to religion, if it's related to social security, if it's related to something else, you can discriminate people, which means you can discriminate anyone. Literally, like that's what the Constitution and the Gender Equality Act says. So we're hoping to see this current government draft a new constitution. We're hoping for civil society to also be a part of it, because we should also have the right to have a say in our country's constitution, and also like the marriage equality bill being one of the very first bills that was successful, passed through the lower house and upper house, and also having two select committee members under the age of 22. That was a really big change. So I'm hoping that there's also going to be some changes within the Constitution.
Sure. No, thank you for that very detailed view. Also, really highlighting the point on marriage equality, of course, is not the end of it. There is, of course, there's so much. I think about the gender identity in particular, we would talk, because I know that there is this entire global debate that's been happening about gender identity, and somewhere some amount of trivialization also that happens in the media by boiling down the entire movement to the woke sort of politics, as well as the politics of pronouns, which is absolutely sounds like a alien battle when it comes to Asia. We are not fighting about pronouns. We are talking about individuals, people, and the very existence. Before running in deeper into that, I think let's first hear about Nepal. And also, Parakram, I was just reminded, you mentioned Blue Diamond Society and Pinky Gurung of that. In fact, 2015 Asia Liberty Forum happened in Kathmandu, and Samriddhi Foundation had hosted it. Pinky Gurung was the person who gave closing remarks for the Asia Liberty Forum. So I was reminded of that, and just a sort of warm reminder of Pinky Gurung. So, but over to that.
She is very inspirational. Yeah. So I think the challenges that we face in Nepal is our policy makers, the people in the policy level, the government are clueless about what anything to do with LGBTQIA plus community is. I think they have put in the constitution, they have given us recognition and protection, and they use this to say that we've done this. Why are you now coming for more issues? I can give an example. Last month, I was speaking at the Kathmandu Youth Conclave, and I got a chance to ask the Prime Minister a question on live television. And obviously, being a member of the queer community, I had to bring LGBTQIA plus issues up. So I asked him about how the Supreme Court has ruled in favor towards same-sex marriage, towards transgender rights. When is it going to be amended in your constitution? I mean, yes, he's an old man. He's also the Prime Minister. But he seemed a little clueless. He also, he's populist, and he likes to make joke out of everything. And also he has an answer for everything. But when it came to this, he did kind of like, yeah, he made it like, he was like, I don't understand the terms. And he's like, everyone deserves rights, but I do not believe in same-sex. I don't understand same-sex marriage. And like, coming from a leader, it's a lot. And the youth out there were just cheering him on without understanding, or I don't know what it was. And yeah, I'm glad I brought it up because we could get to know the Prime Minister's perspective. So in Nepal, within the community and within people, the allies, there was a lot of backlash against him, but there was also a lot of support he got from people who are anti-LGBT. And so it was a battle between people who were really supporting him and saying that, oh, for the first time, we are going to now, we love KP Oli for the first time. We love our Prime Minister for the first time after saying this. However, what was interesting was like when this was shared, his response was shared in India, there was quite a lot of positive response in the sense that they said, at least you got the chance to ask your Prime Minister this question, and like, when will we get? So it was interesting to see how it plays along in different countries in South Asia. But there's no representation of queer people in the policy-making level. We have 1, 2, but just like in India, they could be problematic and old with their thoughts. So there's a challenge. It's difficult. Even when it comes to joining politics, there was a case of a trans man whose gender marker was other in their citizenship, and because of that, he couldn't join politics. So there are a lot of issues that are being faced, and we don't get enough funding. And I think queer people in general do not have that backing and funding for elections or politics. So it's very difficult for them to get in. Yeah, very privileged few people will be able to take this forward. So that is really sad, and I hope there is representation, and I hope with the help of international organizations, which we get a lot of help, and a lot of progress has been made in Nepal through international organizations' help. So we hope with that we can move forward, because there's so many people from our community who are so good, who are so smart, who are making big changes, but they're not being able to come in the political side. So hoping there is growth coming, slow and steady, but
I'll still stick to Nepal and ask a couple of follow-up questions. I think, the whole difference between Supreme Court giving a judgment versus government passing a legislation, which is of course far more sustainable and long-term, whereas Supreme Court judgment can be sort of, something that the government may or may not decide to sort of follow at all. How much does it matter in case of Nepal? And given the whole transitions that are happening politically, economically, of course, we just had new constitution in 2015. There is already some sort of rumor or talk, at least about like another constitution coming up, etc.
yeah.
What's the sort of, how important is it for you to have that legislation in place as against just the Supreme Court judgment?
I think it's very important because in society, we are facing a lot of hate and backlash. Nepal was seen as a more accepting society, but I think with awareness, with more awareness with social media and seeing how illiberalism is kind of rising when it comes to the queer movement, so much more hate that I've been getting being a digital content creator in the past 2 years as compared to 4 years back. So it's going backwards in that term. And keeping that in mind, I think it's so important for the legislation to also support us and have those laws so we can easily, trans people can easily change their gender marker, queer people can get married, and this will be an example that we can set, and also for equality and our freedom and our rights. Because with the movement, that anti-queer movement that I feel is growing in Nepal and in parts of the world, most parts of the world, it is very important for the government and the legislation to make these laws, because people are finding an excuse, seeing the Prime Minister's response to like hate on us more or just go against us.
Sure. No, thanks for that. I think as we approach the final part of it, I would love to also get questions from the audience if they have any questions for the panelists. Before we run into that, there is one message from a member of European Parliament, Mr. Michael Kors, which we're going to play that. And actually, just to summarize this part of the panel discussion, I hate the word rapid fire, but I do want to get one quick sort of response from all of you. That the audience sitting here, of course, many of them are sympathizers of these rights, but they're also involved in policy issues all over the world. I mean, Atlas itself has more than 150 more think tanks from all over the 569 think tanks, which are working in some really important issues, economically and policy issues. What role do you see for a network of think tanks like this, and what's the sort of one ask if you had, or one wish you had, that this is the kind of support we would require, or this is something I would love to hear from all panelists. Maybe let's start from Parakram and then come this side.
I think help with the legislation and help support. Is it working? Yeah. I think help with the legislation and help support these laws come to play, because if and only when international organizations push the government, because they are already funding the government for other projects as well, they are the only ones who can push the government and give them, because we have been advocating, activists have been advocating, but we have been getting this push through international organizations and think tanks, and they have really made a positive impact, and I hope they keep continuing to do that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Kyoka, for you?
I would say I want more support for youth, for young people, because I'm very lucky to have all of these opportunity at a young age, and also being able to be a part of the select committee of the marriage equality bill when I was 18. But I'm not the only youth in Thailand. There's so many more people out there, and they deserve a chance, and really want more space and platform where young people can actually come together and also be supported by all these adults who are experts in their fields, because young people actually have an extremely important role in shaping our society. And I'm not saying it because I am 19, but please support the youth. Good things will happen. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I mean, I think with Atlas, you will not need to convince more that please invest in youth. There is actually a lot of investment that happens in youth. But thank you. And by the way, we did not know that you're 19. It's phenomenal, even more what you have achieved in this. So one round of congratulations for that. Thank you. Thanks for doing everything that you do. Akai, over to you.
No, I think. Just on this. This is good actually. Am I audible?
Yes.
My voice should be heard actually. Yeah. I would really urge this through this forum, break your silence, don't keep quiet. What happened in Uganda, Russia is a very clear significance to all of us to be HRK, means to be aware about this issue. The second thing is also about there should be a sort of diplomatic talks or the bilateral talks between countries. When the prime ministers visit different parts of the world of every country, I think they should make a mandate of discussing the LGBTQI++ community issues on the floor or like before the table. The third point is also about the Beijing 30 is happening. You got it? And so disappointing in, like in my India, the steering committee has been constituted by the cis woman majoritarian, not even included one transgender woman to be part of the steering committee. And they are telling we will have regional consultation, we want to speak for your community. Shut your mouths. We will speak for our rights, you listen. And the political movement to be part of the political structure is a crucial juncture at 21st century. I think this platform, this forum should talk about the political representation in across political spectrum, be it the parliament as well as the state legislatures, which I would really urge through this forum.
Thank you so much, Akka. Thanks for that. And in fact, it could not be a better time to bring in member of European Parliament, Michael Kors from Germany, who's very much representing the community in European Parliament, part of the LGBTQIA sort of subgroup that the European Parliament has, and has, of course, been on behalf of the Free Democratic Party and Friedrich Naumann Foundation, lending voice to this very important issue in Europe, all over Europe, in the European Parliament. I had an honor of spending some time with him earlier in April. Look forward to hearing from him. Kanayyaji, can we play the fourth video, please?
Dear participants of the Asia Liberty Forum, I'm really delighted to have the opportunity to address you today. My name is Michael Kauf. I'm the chairperson of the LGBT organization of the German Liberals. I'm a city councillor in the German city of Dortmund, and until recently I have been a member of the European Parliament. In the European Parliament, I was responsible for foreign affairs and human rights, and one of my key issues has been the situation of LGBT in the world. And currently, we see a deterioration of the human rights situation of LGBT in a lot of countries, in large parts of Africa, in Iraq, in Iran, in Russia. So I'm very happy that there are positive developments in the world, positive developments in Latin America, but also positive developments in Asia. And I count on you as liberals in Asia to support this development, this positive development, also to counterbalance these developments of human rights in the world, which are in general deteriorating at the moment. We as liberals, we fight for the freedom of the individual. And nothing than gender identity of sexual orientation is so much connected to your personality. So that is why we have to fight for LGBT rights. And that's first of all a legal framework with its free of criminalization, but also more. It's about a legal framework that ensures, for example, reproductive rights and family rights for LGBTI. It's a framework that gives diversity management at the workplace, that ensures inclusion of LGBTI in the society. You have to win the hearts and the minds of the people and not only the law. And so it's so important that you are discussing in New Delhi today, how can you promote that in Asia? And when you think about promotion of LGBT rights, do not only think of the national level. I'm, as a city councillor, I always see in my town what the projects on the ground have an effect. And we have an action plan in our city to promote LGBTI rights, to ensure inclusion at the workplace, for example, of the public administration, and go beyond and also motivate companies to have programs for inclusion of LGBTI and give a work environment that's free for them too. So think global, act national, but also act local. And so I wish you a great conference and a good discussion at the Asia Liberties Forum.
Situation, which is the profitable book that we have.
Okay, Mr. George, Mr. George, all right. Any quick questions from the audience before we go to the closing remarks, of course, and we have a little small souvenir for all the panelists. Yes, there are volunteers reaching out to you. Look up for the mics there.
Hello.
Also make a very quick introduction to yourself.
Mikołaj Pisarski, Mises Institute of Economic Education from Poland. Just to give you a quick overview. Poland was one of the countries which got a first openly transgender person elected into the parliament, Anna Grodzka from my hometown, Kraków, 2011. We've had one of the first openly gay mayor of a leading important town, Słupsk, Robert Biedroń, also a member of the European Parliament now. And things looks great before the issue became partisan, because the parties on the left started to brand themselves as the only true allies of the community. It prompted the response from the parties on the right, for the obvious reasons. So my question is, how do we navigate this? Because this issue is not about left or right or partisan issue, it's human dignity and liberty against those who oppose it. But how do we navigate it in this political, more and more polarizing partisan climate that we have? Thank you. And thank you for all that you do.
Great question, and I think I'll open it for any of the panelists too.
I am also the Vice President of the Indian National Congress for the state of Karnataka. Being a transgender woman appointed to such a utmost position and sitting and sharing your dais with a cross section of society who were the governors, who were the presidents of different like years, and be it chief ministers, deputy chief ministers, cabinet ministers. I think sharing that platform, bringing the issues of unspoken gender and sexuality is something, it's a big move. I'm so glad that the Poland has done it. The American Ruffy, who was also part of the White House, like that, and just hearing that the work happening across the South Asian countries. But only the confliction here, the political leaders, I totally agree what you said. It's not the question of left or right or center. It's about humanity and social justice. You get it? So how do you bring up this public discourse and public education to the so-called legislators who are so-called illiterates on the issues of sexual minorities? I think it's challenging to all of us. But making sure that being the vice president of the party, I have liberty to speak on whatever issue that I feel. And not also legitimating only to speak only about sexual minorities. I can speak the global economy. I can speak the political representation. I can speak on various issues. So how do you build the movement of convergence through the so-called idea of sharing our stories and perspectives that concerns me a lot. Yeah, and I totally agree what you said.
Thank you, okay. Look up for the volunteer. If there is somebody at the back as well, let's not miss out the...
Yeah, could you raise the volume of this mic?
Gentleman here and then subsequently that, and
We're facing so much of difficulty. Our voice should be heard, moderator. Yeah, please.
Speak louder.
Okay.
Hi, I'm John Chisholm from San Francisco, and to establish my credentials, let me just say I'm gay. To what extent, if at all, should the law require people who don't want to deal with me, serve me, have me as a customer, to what extent should the law require that? I mean, we believe in don't force people to do stuff and don't take their stuff. If someone doesn't want to deal with me or have me as a customer because I'm gay, shouldn't that be their right? And if you disagree, to what extent are we willing to force people, punish people to deal with me even if they don't want to? What are your thoughts? Thank you.
So this is specifically in reference to businesses, for example, not having the right to not give services, if I understand it right, if I heard it right, to people from, let's just say in this context, LGBTQIA. To what extent sort of we can push the businesses to serve against their sort of, let's say, will. Absolutely no, or to some extent allowed, or what's the level of sort of, or do we want to take a punitive measure against that? What's our stance? I mean, just a few views on that. Like say, for example, if a business, there was in the US at some point, there was a famous case that some cake shop refused to serve cake for a gay marriage. And as a business, for example, that's one of the things that sparked a lot of debate. So
ridiculous. I honestly think that's ridiculous. Just because you're gay, if you're not going to be served something, then tomorrow because you're a woman, you won't be served something, or because you're old, you won't be served something. I think that really boils my blood and doesn't make sense. I think everyone should get equal rights, no matter where they are. And so what if you're different from who you are? You can't just keep serving your own people. Next, a black person won't be allowed, or a brown person won't be allowed. I think, what is this whole thing of this discrimination, or just being like, oh, we don't allow equal rights?
Okay. Kyoka?
I think in 2024, it shouldn't be a discussion. Like, it's ridiculous having businesses refusing service to LGBTQ plus people. And if you don't want to, go ahead, because your business might close down, like tomorrow. Like, do whatever you want, but like they really have to remember the implications of their actions, because young people, queer people will be watching you, and it shouldn't be discussed, because it's a basic fundamental human right, like we should all have access.
I was just want to add, I was connecting. Being a gay person, you are facing that amount of social exclusion. Assume a transgender person in streets who is selling the lemon or the greens. People refuse to come and sold with her. So how do you combat the social discrimination? And how do you fight against such transphobia existing? No matter, we are pride and proud to be as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex communities, and that's not our business. It's a state of mind of the society to think about this process. At the same time, let's not compromise about this attitude. Let's fight against all forms of social discrimination exists. In support and solidarity with you there.
Thank you. We are also coming to the close of this dedicated time for this panel. We do have a half an hour gap after this panel to the next event, so we can continue having these conversations offline off the stage. May I please request Dr. Pam Tomer to join us here on the stage to deliver closing remarks for this panel. It would be very appropriate to hear you at this point. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to start by thanking the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for their support of this and their support throughout the world. They have stood for liberty in so many countries where it's often very, very difficult to do so. And also our participants and our experts, and thank you, Rohan, for such an elegant moderation. This agenda is very important to all of us, to the whole network around the world. I'm so happy that you mentioned when Pinky Garun was the final keynote speaker in 2015 at Asia Liberty Forum in Kathmandu, and was embraced for the courage that had been shown to stand up for equality. And that's very important to us. We believe in equal freedom. And that is equal freedom between men and women, our partners around the world in areas where women suffer legal disabilities and ownership of property, owning a business, being able to work, and so on. Our partners, here we see our friends from CPPR and Kerala, have done so much work to ensure the equal right of women to participate in the marketplace, equal rights of religious minorities, equal respect and freedom for their exercise of worship, equal rights for everyone. That's what equality means. Everyone has the same rights. You can't have equality only among some small group. It's a violation of the fundamental principle that organizes us. And our partners have been very courageous in doing this. We have partners who have saved the lives of people. We mentioned Uganda. So our Ugandan partners have brought people to safety, people who are under danger of being murdered by lynch mobs, have allowed them to escape. We've made grants to the Rainbow Railroad for this purpose, to help people to get out so that their lives are not destroyed. And also in Russia, where we have worked with our Ukrainian partners who have given refuge to Russians who are escaping from the nightmare that is ongoing in Russia today. They have declared the international LGBTQ movement a terrorist organization, and merely identifying, even saying to another person, I think I might be gay or I might be transgender, that is a criminal act in a private conversation. It can be criminalized and you can be imprisoned just for that. And our partners have shown great courage in standing up to this. A few quick takeaways that I'd like to share. One, I love the opening remarks. We should celebrate the victories. This is very important. These are wins. We should be happy. We should be proud of them, as we are for all the other liberal gains, equality among races and religions. This is another important step. It's a long-term struggle. Many people have worked for years on this, and it will continue in many parts of the world. But it needs the willingness to stand there for the long term. But then the third one, accept the victory, but also do not turn into hate as the hate has been directed against others. I'll give you a quick story. From 2003, I was in Iraq and at a conference on women's rights, and 3 women approached me, and they were dressed as one would expect as Salafi. So you expect they'll be very extreme conservative with long gloves and a very conservative hijab. And one of them came up and she said, we don't want democracy. I said, what is democracy to you? Democracy is when a man marries a man and a woman marries a woman, which is a unique definition of democracy. And before I could speak, The other two women, dressed the same as she, said, "Why are you concerned about how other people live? Be happy in your life. You are married. You have a family. Be happy. Don't try to tell the other people how to live." And I learned a lesson not to judge the book by the cover. And we should also remember people can change. And this is happening around the world. People who today might be viewed as enemies, tomorrow, next day, 2 years, they may change as they realize that a daughter, son, nephew, grandchild comes out to them. These are transformative events. So we should be willing to allow people to change and to accept them as friends and not view them as enemies because today they don't understand. And last point, and this came through very strongly, and certainly with Mr. Kauch, and that is there is retrograde motion. And the one country not mentioned is China. China also is turning in the wrong direction on this, criminalizing behavior, erasing gay people and transgender people entirely from the internet. They're being scrubbed clean. And this is very dangerous. And it's something that all of us, no matter where we live, need to stand together against and for freedom. So I'm so grateful for our experts. Thank you so much. And I'll return it to Rohan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tom. I think personally for me over the last 10, 15 years that I have known Dr. Tom, of course the liberal movement is often accused of being against these rights and particularly the business interest not marrying or the capital interest not marrying. Your thoughts have always been a little bit of a guiding path for a lot of us. So thank you for those closing remarks.